It's Liz from blueandhazel.com and welcome to my homeschool channel. Today's video, I want to take you through all of the year 4 books from Ambleside Online. So this is our first year doing Ambleside Online, and I have a year 4, 3, and a year 1 doing school. And so if you're interested in seeing the year 1 or the year 3 book baskets, I will go ahead and leave those in the description. I just kind of walk through and show you what to expect for the year and what books that you'll be reading and what each book is about. So I want to do that with year 4, but there are a lot more books than in year 1 or year 3. So you've probably heard this is the big jump year, and I really feel it. Even though it's our first year, I can tell there are more readings, but the good news is we really just practiced handing him off some of his own reads, and that took a lot of the burden off of me reading so much, especially with having 2 other levels to read to. It really felt like too much. If you're interested in seeing what it was like for us to start using Ambleside with all 3 levels after 2 weeks, I have a video on that you can watch. I'll put that in the description, but it has smoothed out a ton since then, especially now that we've handed those readings over to my 4th grader. And overall, he's been able to handle this. He's a pretty strong reader, so that doesn't surprise me, and I'm not sure that that will be the case next year when I'm having my now year 3 and year 4. I may have to pick up a lot of these readings for her, or we may try to do some of these in audiobook form for her just to help me out because there is a lot of reading. But yeah, so let's go ahead and jump in here with what to expect for year 4. So here is the master schedule. I printed this off. We've finished term 1. We're into term 2, and a lot of the books are actually slowly read throughout the entire year. So 36 weeks to cover, 1 chapter at a time of a lot of these books. And then a few of them you'll see are just read 1 term at a time. So for Bible, we decided to do Bible as a family and not have 3 separate different Bible tracks going for each of the kids with narrations. That was just too overwhelming for me. I have had moms say that once like your kids can independently do these Bible readings on their own, then maybe that would be a good time to try to add that to their school list. But at the current time, we're not doing that part. We're just doing family read aloud Bible time without narrations. So that was one way that I adapted this schedule. The second thing that we'll dive into right now is the history. So the book stack is pretty fatty. These are the history books that I will walk you through. Book 1 from his history lineup here, we have This Country of Ours. And so the history timeline for year 4 is basically like 1700s, and it goes all the way up through the French and American revolutions. This particular book, This Country of Ours, volume 2. So my year 3 is in volume 1, year 4 is doing volume 2. This is the one that's been redone by Donna Jean A. Breckenridge, the Ambleside Online advisory member, and it's fabulous. Like, the way that they tell the stories are easy to read. I feel like there's a lot of detail without being like an overwhelming amount of just facts in there. And my year 4 is actually reading this on his own, and then he narrates to me. One thing to note for this book, just so that you can see how long a chapter is or an assigned reading. Chapter 29 is where this book starts on page 1. That's going to be 8 pages long. Next one is 1, 2, 3 pages long, so shorter. The next one after that is 1, 2, 3, 4 pages long. So what I would recommend doing if your child can't read the full amount, because generally history books can be a little bit just heavier to read, is to see if it's a short one, easy peasy, that's 1 reading for the week. If it's a really long one, then if they're struggling, you could divide that into 2 readings that week. The next one up is called Trial and Triumph, and this is an awesome book that goes across multiple years. So I think this is read actually over all years 1 through 6, and they have different readings scheduled for different years. And so my year 4 is able to read these on his own and then narrate to me. And some of the stories are pretty brutal, and they're just stories of Christian martyrs and how they have suffered for their faith. And so the really neat thing too, I will say Ambleside has done an amazing job of, is lining up some of these people that are also in the same time period as he's learning about in his other books. So they're getting these crossover, people throughout different books and making those connections, and that's been really, really cool. Next one in the history lineup is Poor Richard, and this book my son read on his own, and I'll be honest, I did not pre-read this, so I just kind of based my my thoughts on if he understood the readings by his narrations and how detailed they were. So Poor Richard will have a chapter every other week, so it's a really kind of slowly read book, and he finished this one in term 1. He also was able to make connections because Benjamin Franklin is mentioned in a lot of the other history books as well, so this is just a more detailed book of his life. Okay, so the next one that we have up is Answering the Cry for Freedom, Stories of African Americans and the American Revolution, and this one is slowly read throughout the whole year. I think you have 4 readings in term 1 and 4 in term 2, and I think 4 in term 3. And some of the readings, if you need to split them up more than just one at a time, you can split that into, say, 2 readings a week. It's just a neat way for them to make the connections of some of these people who have led amazing lives during this time period. Another history read that they are going to have that starts in term 2 and goes through term 3 is George Washington's World. So this starts middle of the year. There'll be readings every single week from this, and it's a pretty thick book, but it reads really well. Like, it's a very story form type read. You'll meet some other characters in here that lived at the same time as George Washington, some other really famous people. You'll hear a little bit about their story and their time as a child and what life was like for them. Then it's going to move through George Washington's life. Next up, we have Abigail Adams, and I was surprised to hear on the Facebook forum for Ambleside Online how many people said this was one of their kids' favorite picks of all the Year 4 books. So I'm really excited to actually read this alongside with my boy, even though he's probably going to be doing the readings on his own. This is one I'm probably going to read through as well. If not read to him, if I'm not burnt out reading to the other kids. But it talks about her life before she was married. And we have some maps in here and lots of pictures as you read. And then it goes on to be a biography of her life, basically. So the thing I like about this so far, and we haven't read through a ton of it yet, is that it reads so easily. Like, you feel like you're just soaked in a book that's very conversational, and you do not feel like you're reading a history book. So we're going to learn a lot about her and the people that lived during her time frame. And then we also have The Ocean of Truth, the story of Sir Isaac Newton. This will begin in term 2 and go through term 3, about a chapter every single week. And so that will be a reading that they will have to schedule and narrate. Right. So next up, I want to show you the geography picks for Year 4. So the main one that's the actual living book that they'll be reading is Men of the Mississippi, and this is just following the adventure of a turtle through the kind of geography of the Mississippi River. And half of this book is just connecting with the pictures inside. So we have loved all of the Clancy Holling books, and you can see the pictures are awesome. There's maps inside. And one thing you could definitely do, and I have not always done this with my Year 4, is to grab out a map every time that they're reading this and just kind of locate where the story is talking about on the map. They also have maps inside, so that is helpful too during the readings. But the illustrations are amazing and the detail is incredible. So they also have, for geography, these are optional books. You can access these free. I think on Ambleside Online has the links to these if you don't want to purchase them, but Elementary Geography by Charlotte Mason and Home Geography by C.C. Long. These are books that squeeze in a few geography topics, and they have listed on the back of each schedule which chapters to read from which of those books, and it's very, very minimal. It's like 1 to 2 chapters per term from each of these, and you decide when to read them. They don't schedule those for you. And then if you didn't want to use these, you could definitely just pick a few topics on your own and kind of go do it in a different route. But this is a very simple and easy way to do that if you want. So diving into our more sciencey books on the schedule, natural history books, we have the Storybook of Science, and this one is, I think, my year four's one of his favorites, and I think it's because it's so easy to read. So it kind of follows these kids who are visiting their uncle, and he's really into, you know, science, and he loves to storytell, and so he's going over these topics, explaining things to them as they have questions. And you know, not every single chapter is covered in here. I think some of them have a little bit of outdated information, and so they've skipped those particular chapters, but the ones that are scheduled have been really pretty awesome explanations. And if you do any other kind of nature study, this might be like even a crossover from that. Like, we've got silk and metamorphosis and spiders, and we look at printing and butterflies and metals, metal plating, gold and iron. Next up is Madam How and Lady Why by Charles Kingsley, and this one is a kind of a weird one to me. I don't know why. It's unlike any way that I've ever read about things like earthquakes or volcanoes or landscape forms, and it's very wordy, and sometimes it seems like get to the point already. I don't know, it's just so different. But I have heard from a lot of people that when the first time you read it is a little weird or hard to get, and the second and third time you have a kiddo come through that grade level, you start to appreciate it and the way it's written and the way it describes things a lot more. So I just decided to go with it and to read it this year. I didn't want to axe it before I'd read it, and so far it's been okay. It's kind of slowly read, one little part at a time throughout the whole year. So narrating this one is trickier because not a lot happens, but there's a lot of details, and so that's been okay, but this one has been harder for my son to narrate. And we also have the book Gregor Mendel. It was the first one that we read in week 1. It's a really, really awesome picture book talking about kind of the very first look into genetics. And so we read that in like a day. It was an easy one for my son to narrate. Definitely an awesome picture book, but does not really feel like it's part of the long-term curriculum for us because it was literally just a day read. Let's go ahead and look at the literature reads for year 4. We have Bullfinch's Greek and Roman Mythology, The Age of Fable. And I have to admit, I cut this one out. I was just really overwhelmed at the beginning of starting Ambleside with 3 grades. And I decided this one just needed to go because it was read weekly. It was a lot to read. And I have heard from a lot of moms that after the first few readings or the first few weeks, it gets a lot easier with really short stories. And I believe that's true. I just, at this point, we haven't added this in. So I can't really speak to it, but this is on the list if you are interested in just going deeper into mythology. On that note, my year 3 is actually loving her mythology books. So, you know, maybe this is something that my year 4 would actually love, and he might even, you know, want to have this as like a free read or something. But at this point, I'm not planning on making him read this or narrating this. Okay, so next up we have Robinson Crusoe, and this book was awesome. Honestly, it was a favorite for me. I'd never read it, and I loved it. But I will say the first few weeks, I was like tripping over the vocabulary. It was hard. Just the way that they speak is different than we speak in our language, so I had to get used to that. And my son, like, I think there's some stuff, you know, that probably went over his head or went over my head, but in general, the story was incredible. It was very captivating. It was just, we had to get used to the language. And this one is read over term 1, and there are about 2 chapters a week. So I found that for us to cover those 2 chapters, because they're fairly long chapters, we had to read every single day. That kind of kept us on track, I would say. We just started this one called Kidnapped, and this one is by Robert Louis Stevenson. We have just started the first few chapters, and it looks like it's going to be a great read, a great adventure. I've heard it's a little scary in the beginning, so I'm hoping that's okay, but I'm planning on reading this to my son mainly because I've never read it and I want to read it. Plus, I enjoy having a book that we can connect on every day, honestly, even though he could probably read this on his own. That one gets read for term 2 into term 3. And then we have, starting week 30, it has in term 3, we we have Kidnapped Ending, and then we have Rip Van Winkle, which is something that's read in just 2 weeks. And I actually don't have that book yet here, sorry. And then Paul Revere's Ride is going to be 1 week, a short read. And then Legend of Sleepy Hollow here. This one will be spread out over 4 readings. And so these are just some classic stories that you know, are going to be referenced in other areas and other books. And so you know, having this kind of be in your background knowledge will be nice. Okay, and then we have The Incredible Journey. And this one is going to be spread out over term 3, so 12 weeks to read this. And so it has a chapter a week. And then that is at the same exact time as you're also reading, you're ending Kidnapped the story, and then you're reading through those other ones we just mentioned, Rip Van Winkle, Paul Revere's Ride, which is just a week, then Legend of Sleepy Hollow, which is 4 weeks. So you'll kind of be doing, you know, those books side by side. All right, moving on, let's talk about what is scheduled for Shakespeare in year 4. So starting in year 4, they recommend in Ambleside that you begin reading the actual plays and 1 per term. And so this is a little bit different than, say, like Simply Charlotte Mason, which recommends 1 play over the course of the entire year. So I feel like, you know, do what's best for your family. If you want to go to slower pace and just pick 1 or pick 2, that's fine. I'm really, really excited to just try. With my 4th grader, we're actually going to go down to do Lamb's version, which is a shorter, kind of more condensed version of the story for younger kids. And they have this scheduled for year 1, 2, and 3. So what I'm going to do is just combine all 3 kids, and we have just actually picked our very first one, Midsummer Night's Dream, and I've heard that's a good first one if you've never done Shakespeare before. And we started reading it, and it was a really kind of easy to read story the way that they've written it, and so my kids were really able to follow along. And then one thing that I wanted to just point out that has been super helpful for the Shakespeare, the Charles Lamb's version, is we printed out these little things I got on Etsy. I saw this on the Facebook group, someone had recommended, and it has all these characters. These are fabulous. So for their narrations, because this is something that they have to narrate, they have been able to use their little figures and make silly voices about, like, you know, what they're doing. And so highly, highly recommend this. I will buy these for each of the Shakespeare plays that we do, because they're awesome. So I can leave that link to the shop that I bought that on Etsy. They were cheap too, like $4 or something. Next up, for 4th grade poetry, Ambleside Online has done an awesome job at putting together a poetry anthology. Volume 4 would be for year 4. Volume 3 I have for year 3. Volume 1 I have for my year 1. We decided early on that I needed a way to streamline this with 3 kids. And so I'm actually just going through year 1 together in family time in the morning. So we haven't actually read this one yet, but I'm planning on finishing that year 1 poetry book from Ambleside, putting it down when it's done, and picking up the next one I have, which is year 3. So we'll read that one next, and we do 1 to 2 poems a day. And it's just, you know, I don't know much about poetry, honestly, and so this is really my first exposure, and I appreciate that they have done such a thoughtful job at, you know, combining some really famous poems from famous poets. And I don't have to go find them, they're just all here, but if you wanted to use something else, you totally could. But they've just done an awesome job at making it easy for us. And the other topic scheduled for year 4 is Plutarch. And I had purchased this because I thought we would just do it all, but I realized we're gonna hold off. So I have this book here, Plutarch Slides for Boys and Girls, and it just kind of goes over you know, one main person, I think, per chapter. I've heard a lot of good things about Anne White's How to Teach Plutarch. She has written a book, and she's a Ambleside Online advisory member, and she's just kind of held your hand on how to teach Plutarch. And since I know nothing about Plutarch, I think I'm going to go that route. For now, this book is going to be put aside. All right, and last but not least, I wanted to just show you one way that we have dipped into some free reads. Here's a list of some free reads that my son has done this year so far. My Side of the Mountain, Sign of the Beaver, Johnny Tremaine is the one he's just started on, and Gentle Ben. And so the only ones that are actually on the year 4 book list, which you can find on the back of these papers here, is Gentle Ben and Johnny Tremaine. I think these other ones are like year 3 book free reads, but I've just let my kids pick any of the free reads that we own that are their year or lower. I heard from a lot of moms that honestly the free reads happen more in the summertime when there's no school and there's no assigned anything, and you have the mental space to do some reads and you have time to do some free reads. And the one thing my kids do like is that I don't obviously have them narrate these. And so the thing I required them to do is 20 minutes a day of reading. So, you know, if I didn't tell them that they had to do 20 minutes of a free read, I know for certain that probably none of those books would get picked. They would probably gravitate to comics and just, you know, other kind of fluff stuff that they love to read. And so I've said you can, for this 20-minute period, it's an assigned thing we have to do in our homeschool. You can read anything from the free read list. They don't have to narrate to me, but they do have to read 20 minutes. And I'm surprised that just from those, you know, little by little every single day, how many books that they've been able to finish, each of them, my year 3 and my year 4. So that's been really encouraging. I also bought, I wanted to show you the best tool ever. This is a timer somebody else recommended, and if you don't own one, seriously go run and buy this, because you know, visually they can see it shrinking. They can set it for 20 minutes. I actually bought 2 of these, so my year 3 and 4 each have their own and they're different colors, and that way they can go off and they can set their copywork timers for 10 minutes. Boom, they're done. They know when they're done. I don't have to keep track of it, and it's really helped with the independence. Same with the silent reading. They can set it. They can know exactly when they're done. Okay, so I tried to make a book stack for you to see kind of what you're looking at for year 4. This is a lot of books, but like I said, a lot of them are just dripped out over the whole year, and it is up to you as the homeschool mama to adjust your schedule if you need to pull something, if you need to take longer to read something. And that's something that we did with term 1. We actually moved right in the middle of term 1, and so we took a lot longer to finish term 1. And the way I managed that was that we just colored off the readings as we did them, and I didn't move on to the next week's readings until we finally finished all from that week. And so sometimes a week would take us 2 weeks. That was fine. You know, sometimes we had to take off a couple weeks because I was packing or unpacking, and that was fine. So if you need to go slower, be encouraged to know that's fine. Just read what you have before you move on. And if you take longer than the 36 weeks, then you take longer. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, and thank you for watching. And be sure to check the description if you want to see more of the Ambleside online videos.